Welcome to the Myofascial Health Podcast, hosted by me, Unu. Follow along as I explore the depths of John Barnes' myofascial release approach on my road to mastery. Along the way, I'll be sharing the lessons I learn as I open my myofascial release practice in Austin, Texas, so that you don't have to make the same mistakes I do. Welcome back to the Myofascial Health Podcast. Now, I am joined here by a very special guest. He is a musician, he's a wanderer, he's a yogi, he's been a massage therapist since 2013. It's my honor to welcome Ellis Kantrowitz. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast.
Thank you, Unu. It's so good to be here in Austin live with you.
Yeah, everything is a work in progress. I think sometimes people have a fear of starting things because they want it to be the end goal. They see other people and they might say, man, this person has all these things. But oftentimes you start and then the path unfolds. And it's about not having the fear to start, but just starting in the uncertainty, not knowing where the end is going to be, and then you kind of build it as it goes along. And so you happen to be traveling through Austin, and I thought, hey, what a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to meet and have this podcast. And I thought, hey, I've never shot video podcasts, so why not try that here? So on that note, can you just let us know, how did you start and get involved with myofascial release?
For sure. And it is such a pleasure to be here live with you, talking on the phone, wanting to get on the podcast, chatting about it here and there over the last year, I guess, thinking it's going to happen in person. So it's nice that it's happening in person, for sure. So thank you. Beth, who I used to work with at Healing Hands Massage, specifically in Media, Pennsylvania, was like, Ellis, you would really like MFR. And so she would work on me a little bit. She'd do some arm pulls after work sometimes and let me try. And she would unwind a little. I didn't really fully understand it. And then I went to her studio with my old partner, and Beth taught me a suboccipital release, and I was doing it to my friend Beth, and my old partner was watching in the corner, and Beth started having these convulsions and coughing, and I was looking at my old partner in the corner like this isn't real. And then my old partner got on the table, and she had scoliosis, and she also had Crohn's, and Beth was doing this cross hand release around her thoracic area, and her arms very slowly started moving. And after about 10-15 minutes, just this little demo, she had tears in her eyes, and I said, okay, sign me up for this course. And so I went to Atlantic City, and I did a vacation series, MFR1, Unwinding, MFR2. I believe it was 2015 in the early spring, I want to say, like still a little bit foggy out, And she told me to sit near the front and don't raise your hand to be a demo, just kind of go up, go up. And so John was doing some neck traction technique, very subtle. I think it was like the last day of MFR1 or maybe the first day of Unwinding, I'm not sure. And he was hardly touching me. He had both of his hands under my head, like on the rear, like occipital, this suture here. And he was just hardly doing traction. And my right arm just started, like a puppet was controlling my right arm. And I'm supine, I'm face up. And this pressure started building in my arm, and it went into my chest. And I was like, okay. And I called it, and it was like, there's like over 100 people there. Now he gets it, kind of. And so from then I was really like, there's something extra going on here, and there's opportunities for deeper subconscious things to come out and be healed and be addressed, and, physically, spiritually, emotionally, accessing healing through our fascia and through everything that's intertwined through it, which is everything within our body systems, and then as above, so below. So all these rooted connections through different forms of roots.
I love that. And so Ellis talks about having his arms kind of like a puppeteer was moving around. And what we call that in myofascial release is unwinding. It's an involuntary movement that is not controlled, obviously, by your mind. It's about the ability to let go and feel. And once you're able to do that, you start to realize how much you hold in your fascial system or your fascia. And then by releasing it, you kind of release this tension. Now, you had a firsthand experience before you took a seminar class. And you kind of talked about how the first time you saw it, you were a little bit in disbelief. Now, for me, the first time that I had seen it, same thing happened where I was like, is this real?
Where was the first time you saw it?
I saw it the first time when John had a vacation series here in Austin. And so I was lucky, you know, when there's a vacation series or any seminars where it's in your hometown, you know, where you don't have to travel far, rent a hotel room, all that, it is just meant to be. And if it's ever in your town, I would very much encourage you to take the course, no matter what, because I'm at this point where it's like, I feel like a better person. You know, I can let go of these things or these thought patterns that have
conditioned.
Yes, this conditioned consciousness that society tells us to be, and I feel much more present and in my body. Now, I ask because when I first was introduced to it and I saw that, I still didn't grasp onto it. You know, I had mustered up enough courage to ask John at the last day to say, hey, would you mind if I came on stage? And John has this way of being able to feel into that. And my experience, I felt like my appendages or my arms and legs were fastened to kites, and they were just kind of floating around. And in the very center, John's hands were lightly pressed on my abdomen area. And it felt like he was holding the strings to all of the kites as my arms and legs are floating. And I knew it felt weird, but I didn't completely grasp onto it. I remember first just saying, you know, it just feels like I'm rolling around or my arms are moving, but there was no emotional attachment to that. For you, was it...
There was something like big that I was avoiding that was coming down my arm, and it was physical and it was energetic and it was like past lives, you know. It was definitely intense and not just on a scientific physical level.
Exactly. And so what I love about this conversation that I get to have with you is, as a physical therapist, I have tons of schooling, tons of science, and my first seminars were about the holds and what's the direction of pull and what are you supposed to do. These quote unquote channel 5 questions that I think a lot of people in the beginning want to know because they don't have the feel or the awareness of the energy. Whereas what I'm hearing from you is your first experience, you could sense into something beyond just the physical body. Can you kind of elaborate on what that meant to you?
In that moment, honestly, I don't really know. But in working with Reiki and energetic healing modalities, and also with Tibetan bowls, Northern Indian bowls that I use, there's an extra part of your heart that is vibrating, I think, through, and that is what can be felt in extension when something associated with a pain, a physical pain or weird physical sensation coming up my arm, but also feeling some kind of like remorse or sadness along with that. I don't know if it needs to be identified, so to speak, but there's a lot of different ways to analyze it. But just having an energetic healing background, and I would say that I am a sensitive person, so to speak, in terms of healing arts and picking up on energies and fields and what people are feeling and thinking sometimes.
Would you identify as being an empath?
Yeah, and I feel like that word is subtly overused now. I feel like there's a cliche sort of attachment to that word, and I think people tend to, what I see, and I don't mean this with any real judgment, but an observation is that when that word is used or presented to me by someone, not how you did, but when they're speaking about themselves as an empath, a lot of the times I feel like it's an excuse for why they feel like unmanaged sensitivity in certain situations where you have your feet on the ground, your head can be as far in the stars as you want. And that's that grounded connection that I remember even in MFR1 and MFR2, John talking about, being centered and grounded. And that's where our feeling intelligence is being anchored by. And along with that, my cousin and my shiatsu massage cousin, he also teaches qigong and like talking about an emotional, stressful situation from the past and being like, Ellis, if you're being brought off of your center because of an interaction with this person, that's something to look at, right? So what is taking us off of our center? What's making us distracted? What are we feeling? And so honing these sorts of things and myofascial release has been a great tool for honing my center more, I guess is what I'm coming to at the end of this sentence.
No, absolutely. I think that is where we, as myofascial therapists, have our power. I think it's easy to get squirrely brain, but it's when you feel centered, when you feel present, you're really intentional with what you're doing and expansive all at the same time. I think that's something that John teaches us. Now, in traditional education, we do things where we break them down into smaller and smaller parts, and we say, you know what, if we understand things at the smallest level, then we understand things at the largest level. And that's not necessarily true. What John talks about is a reductionist model of thinking. And I think a lot of times we do that by nature because we try to organize things, and there's a time and a place for that. But just kind of like what you were experiencing, whether it's the physical body, the energetic body, spiritual, or anything else, the only thing that differentiates all these different parameters are the words that we use. But you intuitively knew that once you felt into certain things, that is something that you're picking up on. Your intuition is driving you or guiding you towards. And I'm only now coming to terms with trying to understand that. And it's harder for me to do because I think I kind of lean towards channel 5, but that allows me to be inquisitive. And then, yes, as I've trusted myself more and gone with my feeling as opposed to logically rationalizing things out, there's something that comes from that where I could even tell it's like, maybe we don't have to say it in words, and just feeling it is enough. And I think something that we always get reminded of is, yes, just feel the emotion, feel what comes up. You don't have to know exactly what it means as long as you feel it and you recognize it. Now, you have also said that, you have experience with whether it be, I guess, energy medicines or things from your past that help contribute to you being a myofascial therapist. How do you feel like that has helped you?
Wow, that's a good question. I feel like some of the traumas that I've experienced in my past have been allowed to be recalled with myofascial and with like being in India and being at a temple and kind of breaking down like an open-hearted wound and just like full surrender, right? And so putting that into the body work, being in a sweat lodge in Colombia and like just fully weeping, fully letting go from 2015 when we do I don't want to ruin it, but when we do a specific exercise in unwinding, I cried for the first time in like 19 years from when I was 10 until 2015, whatever that is. And that was unlocked, and relaying that to being in Colombia and coming out of a sweat lodge just after you couldn't have paid me to stop crying, Unu. And that's a rare thing. And so, and also with my aunt getting some of my Reiki attunements and seeing how she channels things, there's all of these different vantage points. And when someone's having an unwinding, I feel like it could look like so many different types of healings going on, so many different past life experiences or something that doesn't need to be analyzed, or a very specific event with a family member from the past, or something that they have no idea what it is. And it's just another avenue of healing that I think relays back to some of these ancient formats. And so I just have felt connected to that through experiencing other cultures and other countries and other languages, and the way that they express grief and the way they express healing and do healing. And that's definitely been just seeing the parallels through surrendering and holding space for that and facilitating that within community.
I love that. I think community is huge. I think John definitely creates a container for all of us to explore these avenues. You know, I get to sit across from you, an LMT, and I'm a PT. And I know that when I was going through PT school, I would have had some judgments around this. And once I was able to let go or surrender those judgments, I got to know you, you know, on a personal level. And it's at the point where, hey, we can break bread together, we can take seminars, travel together. And it's been a connection that I very much value, you know. And so I knew that when you came into town, I definitely had to carve out time in my schedule to see you, you know, and just to make time for us to connect. And, you know, I can look at my past and say, man, you know, it's almost like, the only way I can explain it is it's kind of like rivalries in sports, you know. I went to the University of Texas at Austin, and our rivals were Texas A&M, the Aggies. And we were kind of bred to hate them, you know. It's like, oh man, they're Aggies, they suck, this and that. And so when you met an Aggie, there was already this projection of, I don't like you, right? But once I talked to students who went to that school, it's like, oh, you guys are just students, just like me. And it's like, why did I think that, you know? And I think so many times we get projections or these kind of ways of thinking that aren't necessarily true, and it's important to have these conversations, to sit down. And so that when I got to know you, I could say, man, I know that where his heart is. And when you put your hands on me, I know that there's wisdom there. That not necessarily that you've learned, let's say you said in this lifetime, but almost like there's a connection to whether it's the past or these different experiences that have allowed you to kind of see healing from different lenses and different perspectives. And by doing so, that allows you to then not only work through some of your traumas, and you had this beautiful weeping experience, but through that, now you're able to hold space for somebody else as they're going through their process. And so it just goes to show that we can shed these ways of thinking of the things that we were told that it should be or it was supposed to be. And it doesn't have to be that way. And I would say if you catch yourself saying that, and I'm guilty of this all the time, of saying, I should be doing this, or I'm supposed to be doing that. Once I can surrender and let go and just kind of be still. I think when my mind is still, that's when my intuition speaks to me. But as I'm sure that you know, or maybe you can share some experience on this, starting your own practice is starting your own business. And with that, there's a lot of Channel 5 thoughts that come to me of, okay, I need to do this, this, and this, and now there's a never-ending to-do list. And then I lose sense of my feeling intelligence. And I can convince myself through Channel 5 that I'm supposed to do this, or I should be doing this. You've opened up your own practice. Can you share about how that started and maybe some of the thoughts that you had around that?
Yeah, I feel like after I took that vacation series, I wanted to start weeding out of Healing Hands Massage, and I noticed trying to do myofascial release on a few of my regulars, because I had a lot of regulars. I was doing a lot of massage, a lot of 90-minute sessions, and some of them had big unwindings to the point where this very specific man I'd see him almost weekly, and he would always go to the floor. And so I would just start him on a yoga mat on the floor. I would take away the table. But a lot of clients wanted like that proper deep tissue, full body oil, like even 2-hour situation. And so I realized like I need to kind of like go off on my own. And so slowly, very close friends with the owners, very slowly I kind of fizzled out, and I bought some of the clients. And I knew that I couldn't have massage in the name. I knew that it's myofascial body works, because the massage in the name, you know, you're not a massage therapist, so it's, but still, even in physical therapy, you know, I've had physical therapy in the past where there's a very generic style of physical therapy, which people think is what physical therapy. Mm-hmm. So from that perspective, you know, myofascial physical therapy, same thing. So saying myofascial body works allowed people to remove the expectation of massage. Now, on my card, there's a massage on there, but myofascial is leading the way, and I do massage. But so starting and branching out was a little bit scary, and then connecting with this yoga studio on the main line, they like made me a really cool offer, a really awesome percentage, and I ran the healing arts there and worked with a lot of serious yogis, and also taught anatomy and physiology for the teacher training, and had really consistent clientele, and it was really a special connection there. Got to do some special full moon music events there too. And then losing the opportunity to use a certain space there, and then branching out on my own and having the opportunity to travel and kind of like work and save, and then like do a work exchange somewhere, not spend too much money, and kind of like then rebuild, and then kind of make connections in different places through permaculture, music, and body work. Pretty much yoga. And that's what I've been doing now for a bit. It's kind of like I'm all kind of like under the table since COVID, and just kind of like Peter Panning it and spreading as much positive, unconditional love, healing modalities that run through me. That's what I'm trying to do. I want to have hubs in different places where, oh, there's a clinic here and we can co-treat, and you can come here for 2 months and learn about this place, and also volunteer in the community garden, and then go to Costa Rica and do that in that place, and then come to Philadelphia and we co-treat there. Permaculture too, being a part of this, and the inner city out to the country connection for learning and teaching and education and family growing and community growing from an unconditioned Channel 3 approach, pretty much. That was an elaborate...
Well, I love that, you know, when I talk about the way that things are supposed to be, or they should be, when I hear how you've opened your practice, and it's not I'm going to rent a room and do this. It's kind of, hey, you're doing it on the mobile so that you're not tied down.
Yeah.
And so it gives you the opportunity to kind of dream of these other facets of your life, whether it be permacultures or different cities or traveling, even international. And who's to say that you can't do that, you know? But if you were to think about starting a business, or at least for me, it's like it's supposed to be done a certain way. And so you're kind of molding it to fit the way that you would like it to be. And I think that's the Channel 3 trait to do that. You know, it's not hey, this person did it this way, and so I'm supposed to do it that way. It's, okay, I have learned this healing modality that allows me to serve and help others. But how do I allow myself to live the life that I want? Because I don't want to be tied down to just one specific location. And I think that's so beautiful, and I'm sure that other people will think that. When you first started, you said that you were scared to do that. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I have brought this up at conventions, at seminars randomly, and people, we like exchange info, and like everyone like, yo, that's such a good idea, but like then I don't do it. I haven't done it yet, I guess. But go ahead.
Well, what's keeping you from doing it?
I think I don't know. I feel like it's it's like a grandiose thing, and I'm like getting outside of how it could be done simpler, how to start simpler, like how bad do I actually want it? Because it seems like a dream concept for me. These hubs of spreading this alternative way through our food too. There's a lot of really, like, I'm not trying to be like, you know, there's just a lot of things in society that distract us from truth and from true health. And like, that's one thing that I don't agree about John with, and that's diet for sure. And I totally get the fascial restrictions and how that's affecting our digestive system and receiving nutrients on a cellular level. But I'm trying to nourish my body with things that feel good. And like, I was a vegetarian for 7 years, and I love eating meat, but I do it with really proper intention. And like, my body is an engine, like a car. It is. It's just way more intricate.
I think the food that you ingest is the fuel that your body uses. And so if you put good fuel into it, then for me, I can say, oh, I'm sure it'll run much better, with this car analogy. Now, I think John, is all he's saying is the nutrients that you get from your food or the things that you drink only truly are nutrition once it gets into your cells. And if you have fascial restrictions, it's going to prevent it from getting into your cells. And I can see that. I know of tons of...
Fully.
What do you mean?
Well, like, I feel like even just through digestion, like, we are experiencing an opportunity to have more nutrient-rich food just through the digestive process.
Yeah.
Not necessarily like this full cellular level 100%, but enough where I think the food matters.
Sure.
And that doesn't mean that I never eat a cheesesteak, because, I'm from Philadelphia and I love cheesesteaks.
I think there needs to be a balance. Obviously,
balance.
You don't want it to be like gluttony. Obviously, you don't want to overindulge, but I'm going to eat meat because I enjoy the taste. And if you try to convince me like, hey, you should only eat vegetables or something like that, I'm going to eat meat, Like, I'm not going to do it just because you think it's healthy, but also I'm going to honor the way that my body needs to feel. And I know that how the quality of foods that I eat definitely affects that. Now, something that you had said was being scared to start your business. Can you talk about what fears came up and how you went about overcoming them?
I was fearful that, like, people wanted just my really good intuitive massage combo of different type of massage things that I do, and cupping and gua sha and a lot of other modalities that I had been doing before learning myofascial release, and feeling like can I lead with myofascial release? And I can. And there's definitely a spectrum of clientele, going from like reenacting like an experience as a Viking and knowing exactly who she was and like the sword that was passed down through her family, all the way to someone who, can hardly even have me work on their skin, and just totally like last resort, like worst certain chronic pains ever. And that spectrum of freedom to heal in this open way, and then much more closed off and much more, not many more barriers. So that was like scary though, to like work with the people with many, many barriers. That was a scary thing for me. And I feel like I learned at Healing Hands how to do the business, the way they did the laundry, the way that we rung people up, and making my own soap notes, and having like know how to rebook people, like just from the last session that we had, and like coming up with a good routine, right, for work. So I felt, for 5-6 years working at Healing Hands and also working for a chiropractor and also having my own personal clients, when I transitioned into really my own business after the yoga studio and the business experience that I got there, I felt pretty comfortable. There weren't that many fears by that point. Just what I said. Yeah.
So I guess if someone were brand new and they don't have these experiences, it sounds like for you, the barriers are what you thought that they would need, your future clients, and how that they would perceive you, especially if you were making a transition to fully myofascial release versus you had built up a clientele. They knew Ellis as an intuitive massage person.
Right. Sports massage, all these different modalities. And with yoga, stretching protocols to take home too.
Yeah. And this is how we are kind of raised, or at least for me, going through physical therapy school. Right. We learn about protocols, and I hate protocols just because everyone's so different. So how could you have a cookie cutter approach that fits everybody? Everyone's going to have different needs. And you've shared some past life kind of experiences where it felt like a Viking, so like, what's the protocol for that,
Right.
And so with that, how did you let go of these things that you were good at, that people knew you for, to fully embrace myofascial release and take on this this different path?
I felt like in the beginning, like I went to another course probably within 6 months or a year from my first vacation series, and that really like would always refine my channel 3 workability to not get caught up in this what if sort of mind state, right? And then I have it varies, but every day there is a centering practice, whether it's 5 minutes or it's an hour, involving guitar and mantra, involving connecting with some form of nature, even if it's just acknowledging outside through that window, that tree, and the connection, the rootedness of it to the ground. And then coming back to my center, some awareness of my center, chi, qigong, prana, life force, and feeling connected to that. And then when something comes into your head, you just put your hands in the most proper concave, convex, soft putty position, and it feels right. And you drop into that. And so just that centered, decisive, soft approach, and just living through that, not just when we're doing the cross-hand release, when we're eating, tasting food, when we're connecting with people, when we're communicating, and following that, our center through it, that grounded, divine, green, white connection. And when we can live with that, the doubts can kind of dissipate more and more.
Just because you keep bringing it back to being centered.
Right.
That's where our power is. Now, I think, just to remind everybody, Channel 5 and Channel 3 are the two channels that John talks about. Channel 5 being kind of your linear, your critical, your impulsive, and your fearful side. And your Channel 3 being more of your intuitive, your creative, your joy, imagination,
artistic,
and your loving side. And so when you have those thoughts of, man, what if, that's impulse, right? Because you always think, what if something goes wrong? That's Channel 5, fear. It's very rare for someone to say that and think, well, what if it all goes right? What if it's better than I could have possibly imagined? And once you can drop down and feel that, because it's a different way that it feels versus the what if things go wrong.
That's right.
That is the Channel 3, your feeling intelligence. And so I think what I love about you sharing your answer is when you're centered and you connect with whether it be nature or the things around you, what happens almost all the time without you trying is you slow down. I think growing up, especially in America, with capitalism, it's a rat race. It's like, how do you get to the top and what's the fastest way to go there? But that's Channel 5. Channel 3 is saying, hey, be patient. It can take some time. I can have these huge dreams, grandiose things, but it's going to take time to build that. Am I patient enough? And yes, am I willing to put in the work to get it there? Not to say that it has to happen overnight, because once you start putting those external pressures of, oh, I need to do this by this, that extra pressure then becomes a point of anxiety. Versus if you just have this dream and you can use your Channel 3, your intuition, and your imagination to say, hey, I have this vision. I'm going to take a step every day. Sometimes it's going to be a big step. Sometimes it's going to be a small step. But as long as I'm taking steps towards that direction, I will eventually get there. I think something for me that I've learned is God will give you a vision, but he won't tell you how to get there. Because if he told you everything that it took to get there, you wouldn't start. And so starting is often one of the hardest things, and then keeping it going is the next big thing. Now, I would just share my experience of, when I started business, I had those same fears. I read studies, in PT school, you learn about the research, and you kept hearing these things like 90% of businesses fail. And so who am I to think that, hey, mine is going to be part of the 10% that works? But that's Channel 5, looking at the numbers, and without the feeling of, to be honest, I feel like I've been granted these experiences in my life that at the time I thought were very negative, but actually turned out to be a blessing in disguise. I've had multiple knee surgeries. I grew up playing soccer and I tore my ACL multiple times, and it was so disheartening. I had to let go of this identity of being a soccer player, these dreams of playing in college, and I was a little bit lost. I didn't know who I was until I met this physical therapist, where he introduced me to this profession that I didn't even know existed. But I knew that I gravitated towards academics and athletics, and I thought physical therapy was the perfect way to bridge this curiosity that I had. And so through my injuries, I went to physical therapy school to find the solutions to my own injuries. Through that process, I learned different things. And then ultimately, when I got introduced to myofascial release, I knew that this was something that could help people. It wasn't something that I thought, hey, this is, the best thing or anything like that. I was like, okay, if he's helping people, if I can learn this, I know that I can help somebody. And that's all I went with, And there's a lot of rejections along the way, disheartening moments, but that's so funny for me to be able to look back. They say hindsight is 20/20, and I think some people will get caught up in their traumas and saying, I can't believe this thing happened to me. Whereas, and that's the channel 5, why did this happen to me? Kind of playing the victim. The channel 3 mentality is, well, what did I learn from it? I learned that traditional healthcare and medicine isn't the golden standard. And so those of us who maybe have fears of starting our own practices, I would just say, just know that the bar is set pretty low if it's the traditional model, right? And so if you do anything to step out beyond that, you're going to be able to set yourself apart. Now, do you have the confidence to speak about that? When someone challenges you, can you stay centered and have an answer for them and treat them with compassion because they don't know? And I know that because I was one of John's biggest skeptics early on, that when someone disagrees and has kind of a trigger against his work, I don't shun them and say, oh, he's not going to get it. I say, I'm so glad that you took the time to try to learn this. What are your fears around it? Why does it rub you that way? Oh, that's funny. I also was rubbed poorly in the beginning. And so just be patient with it. It might not be your time, but when you are ready, just know that we're all here rooting you on. And just whether it be starting myofascial release first or starting your own practice, there's such a huge community that wants you to be able to succeed and see you succeed, because then we know that we're spreading the work. We're only as strong as the members that we have, and the more positive influences and positive results that ultimately we're trying to get, the more that the ego gets let go of, And so, I've spoken to a lot of physicians who, kind of have this complex about them that, hey, because they went to med school and they went through residency, that they know the answers. And one, that's very hard to do, and I definitely commend them for it. But to only look at the human body in its physical form, to not even acknowledge the emotions that people have and how that might manifest as an injury, as a disability, quote unquote, as something that we kind of organize and say, oh, you have this disease, would be missing such a huge part of the picture. And something that you have said is, we've kind of gone through past experiences, past life experiences with Vikings or this, that, and the other. And I know that early on, if you would have even said, what we're doing is working on past lives, I would have up and left. I'm only now coming to a point in my life where it's like, okay, past lives are a concept that people talk about. Does that mean that they're any less than me? No. Is Ellis someone who talks about past lives, who helps clients heal from their pains and injuries? Absolutely. And so I can just see the common ground, and as long as we're trying to help and serve those patients and clients who trust us enough to have us work on their bodies, which can be a very scary and intimate thing where, people have been betrayed or overpowered, that trust is something we don't take lightly. And as long as people are getting better, then who's to say what is right and what's wrong? It's just a different avenue to tackle the problem. Thanks for listening to another episode of Myofascial Health. I help myofascial release therapists create beautiful websites for their MFR practices, even if they aren't tech savvy. If you're just starting your MFR practice, or you're an experienced MFR practice owner, learn more about how I can help at www.myofascial.health/website.